We're kicking off today with a look at Once Upon a Time in the West. Drew, would you like to give us a rundown on that?
Okay. Should probably put some sort of health warning in here for what's about to happen, but... Now, once on time in the West, railroad man lost his damn mind in the West. Henry Fonda killed a kid, nothing less. Now Chuck must put his behind to the test. Then through the shadows, in the saddle, ready for battle, Cheyenne and his boys, and here come the poison. Behind his back, all the killing he did. Front and centre, nowhere for Jill that weird. Who that is? I mean, Bronson bad for your health. Looking damn good, though, if you could see it yourself. Told a Fonda is a bad man, but she don't fear that. Chuck got mouth organ too, ain't stopping to hear that. Trying to bring down Frank, the big villain. Well, y'all gonna see that it can be done. Understand me, son. Chuck's slick as he is. He's the quickest he is. Did I say he's slick as he is? Yes. Repurposing the theme song from a now, I am sure, mostly forgotten 20-year-old Will Smith flop to introduce Sergio Leone's masterpiece from another 30 years before that. Proving once again that we have our fingers ever on the pulse of pop culture. We should probably be slightly more concerned that we don't detect one, I guess. Released in the UK almost exactly 70 years ago, C'era una volta il West, or Once Upon a Time in the West, came at a time when legendary Italian director Sergio Leone was ready to be done with westerns, but Paramount offered him a bunch of money and Henry Fonda, to which he presumably replied with whatever the Italian is for, "Aye, alright then, you've twisted my arm." While clearly a Leone film, it is markedly different from the more action-heavy Dollars trilogy and shows a greater interest in the build-up to violence than the violence itself. In another departure, though it's arguable how well it was achieved, the story is a woman's, even if she has limited agency. Now, in the unlikely case you couldn't glean it from my clearly exceptional introduction, I suppose I better give you a fuller plot recap. The West is entering its final decades, embodied here by the progress of the Transcontinental Railway. Knowing that this transformative technology will eventually be headed his way, farmer Brett McBain, Frank Wolf, has purchased a plot of land called Sweetwater, the only source of water for miles around that he knows the railway will have to pass through in order to replenish the trains. This makes Sweetwater valuable property, but his contract with the railway company expires if he hasn't built a station by the time it arrives. Something unscrupulous railroad tycoon Mr. Morton, Gabriele Ferzetti, is determined to ensure. To this end, he employs Henry Fonda's Frank, an amoral, cold-blooded killer, and his gang to scare McBain off. Being ever the expedient chap, Frank kills him and his family, rather than, do any more work. But unbeknownst to him, Frank had a widow, Jill, Claudia Cardinale, to whom the property passed. Frank then turns his attentions to this unforeseen complication instead. Two other figures loom large in the story, Jason Robards' Cheyenne. In the script, his full name is Manuel Gutierrez, but curiously enough, this was dropped from the film because, well, Jason Robards. A sort of bandit with a heart of gold, or at least tarnished bronze. And Charles Bronson's Harmonica, a mysterious gunman who has been seeking Frank. Cheyenne and Harmonica, who both have reasons to want revenge on Frank, band together, after a fashion, to help Jill and to bring Frank down. Once Upon a Time in the West has probably my favourite opening in all of cinema, almost entirely free of dialogue. Between viewings, I actually tend to erase the few lines spoken by the hapless, dangerously oblivious station agent, as Stoney, Snakey and Knuckles, what names they have, wait in the parched town for the arrival of Harmonica, time marked only by the drip of water, buzzing of flies and the squeaking of a metal windmill. It sets the structure for much of the rest of the film. Slow, empty, hot, dry, until a sudden burst of violence punctuates the stillness. There's a minimum of dialogue throughout, Leone preferring to tell his story with sounds, landscape, action, and faces. Especially with eyes. The eyes! The eyes have it right enough, and Bronson's are particularly expressive. And eyes also afford the film one of its most memorable moments, when the leader of the gang that has just murdered the McBain family is revealed to be Henry Fonda, his blue eyes striking against his weathered skin, right before he murders a child, a real casting against type for the habitual good guy. There are many to choose from, of course, but this may also be the great Ennio Morricone's finest score, generating incredible mood and tension while not being anything like as overbearing or prescriptive as in, for instance, Once Upon a Time in America. Shot in Arizona, Utah in the US and Sonora in Mexico, as well as Leone's traditional haunt of Spain, and at the legendary Studio di Cinecittà in Rome, the film looks glorious, in no small part due to Tonini Delle Colle's fantastic photography. Many of the striking landscapes he has captured, though, aren't of the West but of the face, with seemingly every wrinkle and pore visible in Charles Bronson and Henry Fonda's faces, telling a story all by themselves. And talking of the actors, Fonda's brilliance is a given, but Charles Bronson, while not of Fonda's calibre, is perfectly cast and has never been better. And it utterly shames his later turns in that Michael Winner pap. Once Upon a Time in the West is a master filmmaker's masterpiece and remains one of my favourite films of all time. So, unsurprisingly, I'd encourage anyone unfamiliar with it to check it out at your earliest convenience.
Yes, I like this an awful lot too, and I just don't have in general, have a lot of patience with westerns, but this one, despite being one of the longer westerns that I've seen, really does drag you in all the way throughout it, and it's, yeah, as you say, it's a tremendous opening, which really does set up the whole tone and pacing of the rest of the film. It's a great little microcosm of it, isn't it? Yeah, terrific stuff. The only good thing Dario Argento's ever been involved with, and one of the few decent Charles Bronson things as well. Yeah, it's just there's some really interesting casting. The performances, as you say, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot to like in this film, and not really anything to dislike. It's an interesting film to think about in terms of Leone's arc as well, because if you're thinking of The Good, the Bad and Ugly and his previous, the Dollars trilogy, that is a western that borders on parody at places. It is not taking anything particularly seriously, but this one is much more straightly told and probably more effective for it. You could argue you could have a bit more fun with the various films in the Dollars trilogy, but this is clearly a better film than any of those. Yeah, no, just echoing everything else you say. Great cinematography and great soundtrack. There's just a hell of a lot of things to recommend in it.
Yeah, I just think this is just the most amazing film. It had actually been a while since I'd watched it. I'm not quite sure why. Probably because I'm compelled to keep all discs on the shelf unwatched for a certain number of years at a minimum. But I'd never forgotten it, and I watched it, and there's always that slight concern when you come back to a film you'd liked a lot.
Yeah.
After a while, and you think, well, in the interim, I've watched a lot of other films. I've maybe changed a lot. Is this going to hold up? And I watch, it's like, wow, this is better than I remember, which is a very nice surprise to have. And I really mean, I cannot think of an opening in cinema that I enjoy more. It's just, it's so masterful. I mean, perhaps if there's one fault I could find with the film is that maybe there shouldn't be any dialogue in that opening at all. Yeah. You could probably do everything that silly old man does. He's not taking the temperature of that room at all.
Yes.
But you could probably do most of that unspoken, I think, without even having to excise the character. But just the guy with a slight squint trapping the fly in his gun, and then the guy in the black shirt and the black cap with the water dripping on his hat, and then that squeak, that's such an iconic sound. Yeah. I hear anything like that, I immediately think of this film, that squeak of the windmill. It is the most masterful opening. And as I said, and you agreed, Scott, it's like, right, here's just like the film in a microcosm, and then like the rest of it's almost like a repeating pattern of that throughout. Yeah. So it sets you up well for how it's going to be, and just that capsule of the beginning of the film, in those 5 or 6 minutes probably. I actually meant to while I was watching it to keep an eye on how long that was, and after about 10 seconds I was like, no, I'm just watching this, and I forgot to check, so I'll just enjoy this film instead. That short period, however long is at the beginning of the film, that one thing is better than almost anybody else has ever made ever. It's that good. It's that assured. I wasn't sure if I knew whether you'd seen this before, but I know not so much a distaste for westerns, but it's not by any means your favourite genre or anything. So I was a wee bit
Yeah.
concerned about quite how you would respond to this. But even like for someone who's not a big Western guy, you're getting clearly a lot out of this as well.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I'm no means an expert, but this feels almost contemporary if I didn't know better in the way that it's structured and the way that a lot of it's shot. It feels closer to Unforgiven or the kind of more modern kind of Western revival stuff, which a lot of things in that little subgenre I've actually quite liked, with a bit more complexity to them, and it feels closer to that than certainly my experience of like John Wayne films or these other kind of the kind of the mass-produced boilerplate westerns that kind of were shown so often on telly when I was growing up and was immediately put off and sort of discarded the genre. I'm sure there's lots of great ones in there, but the ones that seemed to be the most popular were just simplistic garbage, and this certainly is not. It's has a bit more strings to its bow than a lot of the John Wayne stuff I've seen.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't consider that a good a good comparison point, because John Wayne was an appalling actor.
Yeah.
Also an appalling person, so that matched up quite nicely. But yeah, I've never understood the regard for John Wayne, who never played the character. Who every film he was in played John Wayne.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's not just this, it's in the Dollars trilogy very much as well, although, yeah, as to a degree, there's, if not parody, it's certainly pastiche.
Yeah.
The Dollars trilogy of kind of more classic westerns, but they are kind of grittier, I guess. But the Dollars trilogy onwards is much closer to something like you see Unforgiven or The Proposition.
Yeah.
And Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada. Anything that's got to come in the wake of Unforgiven, definitely there's much more of a through line from them to that than there was from the John Ford stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just a simple mastery of cinema, but it's still within that genre, and it feels to me like it's playing a little bit with it a wee bit. Maybe I'm just reading too much into this, but remember, you're aware of the whole kind of white hat, black hat thing.
Of course, yeah.
And that feels to me like it's in this film a little, but kind of playing with it. The closest you have to white hat is Charles Bronson, but it's sort of like a slightly greyish hat.
Yeah.
Whereas Frank has a really dark hat. So I read that. Maybe this is just conjecture, but I read that as like, okay, Charles Bronson's largely good, but he's got a bit of dirt in his soul.
Yeah, yeah.
Frank's the absolute villain. And then you've got Cheyenne, who's sort of a kind of brownish hat. It was like, yeah, he's not great, but he's not the absolute villain. So it feels like it's maybe just playing with that and using that a wee bit, while still adding stuff that you certainly wouldn't have seen John Wayne doing.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like subtlety. Acting, not being a jet. Yeah, I don't like John Wayne. I think the only time I found him even vaguely tolerable was True Grit. And then the Coen brothers came along and said, yeah, we can do that better, so you don't have to watch the John Wayne one anymore. Hey.
Very nice of them, isn't it? It's public-spirited.
Yeah, it's a real public service, that, absolutely. I've entirely lost my point now, though. I've just gone down a I hate John Wayne rabbit hole. But yeah, it definitely has a much more modern feel. I mean, it's nearly the 70s, so it's perhaps not that much of a surprise when you consider just how cinema was changing.
That's true.
In the 70s, but it is. Yeah, I don't have a further point to make. It's really good.
What we're saying is we like it. Yes.
Yeah,